Two things happened to me when I was 27 years old. The first is that I produced my first movie for Disney Studios. And the second, I threw a chair at an ex-boyfriend. I know, not my proudest moment. But what mattered wasn't really the chair. What mattered is what I realized as the chair was flying across the room. I remember watching myself in that moment, feeling embarrassed and disappointed that it had actually left my hands. And I remember thinking, who is that? Who am I? Because I knew in that moment that throwing the chair wasn't a choice. It was conditioning. I had grown up in an environment where yelling was communication, where drama was normal, and where being reactive, it was just the way we were every day. And I realized as that chair was flying across the room that if I didn't change something, I was going to keep showing up as this version of myself over and over and over again. So that New Year's Eve, instead of giving myself a resolution, I decided to give myself a year-long experiment, a theme, something that I could work on throughout the year. And because I was in Hollywood, I gave myself the theme to only be dramatic when drama was necessary. I know, but it was Hollywood and it was in the 1990s, and your plumber had a screenplay in his toolkit. Your waitress was rushing you because she needed to get to an audition. Everybody was desperately trying to make it, and the volume was at a constant state of 11. I did not want to be one of those drama queens, one of those people whose fear and panic kept choosing for me. I wanted to change my life, but my problem was I wasn't very good at it. I tried watching my behavior, but I would always notice my reactivity after the event. It doesn't really help that much. So I had to do something different. I had to dig in deeper. But what I actually did was I subconsciously quit. For the first 3 months of the year, I don't think I even remembered that I had a theme. And when my birthday came around in April, I remember saying, "Hey, Suzanne, didn't you promise yourself you were going to change your life this year?" Okay, so I tuned in a different way. This time I noticed my voice, my inner voice noticing, and I tuned in like a radio station, like one that I had never listened to before, one that allowed me to hear my thoughts and hear when I was being tweaked, or when I was wanting to snap at someone, or when I was getting defensive, or when I was sad. My dad used to always say to me, "Suzanne, don't let the highs get you too high. Don't let the lows get you too low. Stay in the middle. Keep your feet on the ground." I had no idea what he was talking about until I started noticing. I thought my emotions chose me. I didn't know that I had agency over my emotions, and mine were so high, high, and so low, low. I actually felt bad for other people who didn't have the emotional range that I had. Theirs wasn't as expansive as mine. Ah, I started having the nickname Feel More because I felt more than most people. And the thing is, I started to notice that as I paid more attention, as I started noticing, there was this little space, this little moment, this little point in time between when stimulus happened and I could respond. There was this little space, as Viktor Frankl says. So I started paying attention to the space. And what happened is for the rest of the year, I kept tuning in to that tiny moment. And I kept choosing differently. I would pause and choose again, pause and choose again. And by the end of that year, that woman who threw the chair, that temper, it was gone. And I renamed myself Suzanne version 2.0. Now, the funny thing is that nothing's really changed since then. Year by year, theme by theme, I keep upgrading myself like you upgrade your phone. Today, I'm proud to stand in front of you and say, I am Suzanne 45.2. I'm not perfect, but I am profoundly more choiceful than the woman who threw that chair across the room in the 1990s. Here's the funny thing. You probably wonder why I'm telling you this story. And it's because I thought this one thing. I thought this work was just for me. It was my healing, my growth, my journey. It didn't occur to me that it was anything more than that. But something funny happened. People started saying to me, "Something's different about you." And they asked me what was happening. And I remember saying, "Here are my healing stories. This is what I've been going through." And as I shared those healing stories, they started healing too. And as they did, something occurred to me that had never crossed my mind for as long as I lived, because our conversations started changing. Our relationships started changing. The emotional temperature in the room changed. And I realized personal growth isn't just personal. Healing ourselves, becoming better humans, it may be our greatest responsibility to society. Because when we interrupt our automatic reactions, we become more choiceful, and the ripples of our growth become collective. And we start to reshape the world and the future that we share. Now, that's a great idea, but then we got this little challenge over here. Carl Jung very famously said, "Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life and we will call it fate." So I looked into this a bit, and it turns out that researchers generally agree that 95% of our daily behavior is driven by our unconscious thoughts and fears. That means 95 out of 100 times when the person cuts you off in traffic, when someone says something untoward to you, 95% of the time, we're just reacting. Whew, that's a lot. So if most of our behavior is automatic, that means we're not actually choosing. And if we're not choosing, how are we going to interrupt our old patterns? How are we become less reactive or become more choiceful? Because when we shift, when we become choiceful, something inside us shifts. And it changes our families, it changes our workplaces, it changes our communities, and even our societies. Here's one thing I truly, truly believe. Healed people, they don't harm people. Healed people don't hurt their children. Healed people don't shoot up schools. Healed people don't start wars. And what I know is that a healed person can change any room they walk into. And so, how do we change these patterns that are so ingrained in us? The ones that keep us reacting in the same ways over and over and over again. How do we learn to undo something that's been ingrained in our brains and rehearsed over decades? Healing doesn't happen just because we want it to. It happens because we choose to change in the moments that matter, in when we pay attention to our outbursts, or we keep going even when it's uncomfortable. When we notice these moments and we choose, when the old version of us shows up, to pause and choose differently, we change ourselves. And that's amazing. Transformation, though, it's not built in these huge grand gestures. It's built in these tiny moments of noticing. This tiny place where conditioning that we've had forever meets conscious thought, where choice actually lives. There are moments where huge stimuli come at us, and some of the stimuli are good, but most of the stimuli cause that reactivity in us. And we can see here that when that stimulus happens, our instantaneous reaction, 95% of the time, is to explode in some way, shape, or form. But I want to introduce you to the coolest catcher's mitt in the universe. This catcher's mitt can catch any stimulus that comes at you. The person who cut you off in traffic, your boss sending you an email that was just really nasty, the person who said something mean to you in the grocery store line. It can catch all of that stimulus. And instead of us reacting with the 95% of us that is constantly in reaction, what if we start to notice that this catcher's mitt is actually the greatest fork in the road ever? And when we see that there's a fork in the road, there's another direction we can choose. And we got to notice where the fork comes together. This place where my palms hit one another is this tiny place. It's called the millisecond. I call this the millisecond technique. We look at that tiny moment and we ask ourselves, do I want to choose to do something differently in this moment? And when we say yes, we choose to respond as opposed to reacting. So what this means is when we bring awareness to that moment of change, we have choice. And we no longer need to be living from that unconscious part of our mind. So here's one thing that I would love for you to do as you leave here. This week, I want you to notice one thing that is you wanting to do something that you know isn't quite right. One moment where the old version of you wants to show up, grab the microphone, and start talking. And when you do this week, pause. Choose differently. But let's not stop there, because personal growth, it's our greatest responsibility to each other. So what if you could go out today and teach the millisecond technique to one person? One person who could probably use a little bit more choice in their life. It could be a parent or a daughter. It could be a brother or an uncle, or even your child. One person, because maybe the future is not shaped in these massive moments. Maybe it's shaped by millions of tiny ones. One interrupted reaction, one choiceful human, 1 millisecond at a time. Thank you.